Good. I'm good. Chilling like a villain with my hands on the table, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, let me
And then
adjust
how you
this
be, bro?
camera. I'm good, man. Just found out one of the guys I work with killed himself earlier this week.
Wow.
And it comes
Dang.
off of us just having a whole, like a whole show on,
Mental health.
mental health and just, we didn't really touch on suicide so much, but definitely
Right.
in the future we should talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's something about in the veteran community we deal with a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. For sure.
We've lost way more people outside of the war than we ever did during the war.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize just how high the numbers are. And there's a lot of programs out there, was it like 22 a day and all that stuff that kind of
Right.
touches on it. But I think the best thing that we can do as a community is just be available
Right.
for just be available,
Yeah.
for whenever someone needs you, man. Just answer that phone. If you know it's a veteran, answer the phone.
Yeah.
Answer the phone. And maybe
Because
if it's bullshit,
yeah, you never know what that call is. You know what I mean? And the reality is that if more, I think people get so self-absorbed with their own lives that we can't take the time to realize that, you know what, you don't know what battles people are fighting. You know what I mean? You
yeah,
don't know, and like I say, that old saying, you never know. The reality is you never know. And sometimes all they need is for you to just sit on the phone with them. They ain't got to talk about nothing. Just knowing that someone is there that they can lean on.
well, I've made a rule in my life that if it's somebody that I know, if it's a vet, whether it's a Facebook call or a phone number that I have stored, I make a rule that I try to answer it every time. And the reason is because you just never know if you're the last person on the list that they call.
Yeah.
Um, so I've done that. I try to live my life like that. I got a few guys that I'll ignore a call every now and then because they call a lot, and I'm not really worried about them. But especially somebody that I don't hear from a
Right.
lot, I see that number pop up or that name pop up, and and I go ahead and I give them a listen. Hey man, how's it going, dude? Yeah, fuck yeah, I remember this
Right.
one time we did that one thing back in the day.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
just think it goes a long way to let people know they're not forgotten, because I do understand how lonely you can feel or how isolated you can feel when you're not, directly connected to that community.
For sure.
So just to hear about, a guy that I can't say that we were like best friends and stuff like that, but like
Right.
I knew the guy. He was a good dude, a little
Right.
eccentric, but he never hurt anybody. He wasn't a bad dude.
Right.
He
Right.
always willing to talk to you, nice guy. And just to hear that, you know, he he lost,
Right.
he lost that battle
Right.
with himself and everything like that. It's really tough, man.
Yeah.
It's tough to see that in guys that you just like. Yeah, I would have never pegged him for a guy like that,
Right.
but that's how it is. A lot of
Yeah.
guys internalize that, and if they
Yeah.
want to go, they want to go.
Well,
There is no
I
reaching
mean,
out.
man, a lot of times, man, it's and it's funny you say that because in many aspects, it's the people that you least expect. You know what I mean? A lot of times, it's the ones that I don't know. Have you ever heard that story of the town clown?
No.
So it's an old Dodge. I heard it somewhere. I don't remember where I heard it, but years ago, there's a thing called a town clown. Like once upon a time in the town, there was a clown, and when everyone was feeling down, the doctor would say, "Go see the clown."
Hmm.
And so a woman comes in and she says, "Doc, I'm feeling down." And he says, "Well, go see the clown." So she goes. She comes back, and she says she wrote the doc a letter and said, "Doc, I'm feeling better. Thanks for your advice. Everything's all right." And so the guy walks in and he does the same, comes back and he says, "Doc, I'm really feeling sad. I'm down. I'm stuck in shame." And so he sends him out and says, "Go see the clown." He says, comes back, he says, "Wow, that clown turned my frown upside down." Then one day everything changed when a man walks in he had never seen before. And he says, "How can I help you?" He says, "Well, Doc, to be honest with you, I'm feeling down." He says, "Well, don't worry. There's a guy that lives at the end of the town." And he says, "Wait, let me stop you there, Doc. I am the clown." And just like that, everything changed, right?
Yeah.
That's the end of the story. He says, "Doc, everything." He says, "I am the clown." And so then what do you do then? Because oftentimes it's the one that's giving the most, the one that's pouring out a lot of times, the one that's smiling and always putting up the front or whatever the case is. A lot of times those are the ones that need the most assistance, that need the most help. You
Yeah.
know, um, and that's one of the worst situations to be in when you have somebody that you love and you care about and all that kind of stuff, but you've gotten so comfortable with them seeming to be so strong
Yeah.
that you forgot that they were human too. And then all of a sudden you lose them because they don't have that person to lean on and turn to. They end up pouring from an empty cup.
Well, I mean, and people have been saying it for several years now. Suicide is the biggest killer of men that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
More than warfare, more than gun violence, more than anything else. It's us killing ourselves.
right,
And that's definitely something we need to talk about. Eventually,
right,
we should have a whole show on
right,
just like masculinity and the
right,
difference between masculinity, toxic masculinity, and like the modern man and like where you
right,
fit at in the world,
right,
because it's not easy. It's not easy in this modern era to um, to express yourself when it comes
right,
to feelings and stuff like that. And coming
right,
from the military, we had a very toxic culture
right,
as it pertained to
right,
mental health. We were very suck it the fuck up or suffer in silence
right,
uh, for generations, and like it just wasn't. It didn't help. You know what I'm saying?
right,
It didn't help, and it's not helping us now.
for sure.
But anyway, that's a talk for another
Yeah,
time.
yeah, 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 yeah.
We had a good show planned today. We're going to talk about faith. All right. And my man, Reese the poet here he's a man of God. He's a man of faith,
Yes, sir.
in the Lord. I am not so much. So,
Yeah, this should
so
be fun.
I'm gonna be approaching it from a different angle, and we're gonna see if we can actually find some common ground
Mhm.
as we kind of dive down this rabbit hole of what we talk about faith. We'll probably bring up some fear, and stuff like that. And I'm gonna let you start it off, man. Why don't you? So my question for you is, what is faith? Um,
Mhm.
how would you define faith? And as you define it, tell me how you feel that you find your faith, whether it be in God or in people or whatnot and stuff like that.
Well, so I was thinking about this on the way, actually driving earlier, and I've been thinking about this all day. Like, I would say that starting from the first part about what do I think, what is faith? Well, I mean, obviously, biblically, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. But I think that on a on a I would say societal standpoint, like when I look at people, right? How do I find faith in people, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I have to remember is that I don't approach it from natural eyes, right? I don't approach it from a natural perspective. I don't look at people from what they've done, what they believe in, what they stand on. I don't approach it from what they look like. I don't look at people anything other than you individually and objectively are made in the image of God. And so you have inherent value. And I believe that there is something built in you that reflects the nature of God. Now, whether you choose that is a whole different ballgame, right? That's a whole different animal. Whether you choose to operate in that, light is different. But what I will say, my faith in humanity comes with my standing on the fact that God is truth, right? I stand on the fact that God has created us with this way that even though it may be dark around us, we have an intrinsic light in us that can break through it. So I think that no matter how bad the situation is, from that perspective, no matter how bad the situation is, I think the darker that it gets, the greater our light can shine. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I
And
hear you.
that's how I look at it. And so, it's like that optimism perspective, right? That one crazy person is like, oh, I broke my leg. Well, at least you got two of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be like one of
Yeah.
them crazy. But I really look at it from the fact that no matter how dark it gets, all I see is the sun, and that's the SON. You know what I'm saying? That all I see the light that God provides, the beauty that still exists. And so because beauty still exists, I'm able to maintain that faith and knowing that, you know what, this may be a little crazy, but I know that he's in control.
Hmm.
I know the beauty is still here. You know what I mean? I know that even in your craziness, even if I disagree vehemently with everything that you do, even if I don't like what you do, even if I hate everything about the agenda that you push or whatever the case is, I still look at you as a human being. I still see you as beautiful because you are made in the image of the God that I stand for and love. So I think that would be, in short.
Okay. No. Hey, man, that's good. So the way I would define faith is,
Mhm.
you put faith in things that you don't know are, first of all, you don't know if they're real,
Mhm.
and you don't know if it's going to work out. So that's why I put, me as a person who is not a Christian, I find
Mhm.
myself putting my faith in, I don't want to say humanity, all right? Because humanity
Right.
as a rule just lets us down every
Right.
day, all right?
Right.
But in people, when you can see the good in people, all right, when you can see the good in people, um, I feel like that reward is so much better than if I put it into a deity that I can't see, and I never see if they're working in my life unless unless you're looking, because we say it all the time. If you're looking for God, you'll find God.
Right.
If you're looking for evil, you'll find evil.
Right.
Looking for good, so on and so forth. I like putting my faith in individual people. Believe me, you are going to get burned more times than you're gonna come out on top. But when you come out on top and you put your faith in individuals, you put your faith in people, man, when they succeed, or they prove you right, or they they hit it home. I feel, because it's so tangible to see. You put your faith in like a family member that's an addict that wants to change, or wants to sober up, or wants to succeed at whatever job they're doing, and then you see them do that. The reward here is just great. And it's not that you're getting a reward. You're not getting anything from them. I'm not getting any money. I'm not getting any. I didn't help them do that. They did that on their own. But just to be a part of that, to see that, to see that growth, and to see that, to see them succeed, is really, to me, is the most powerful thing. When I was a preceptor as a paramedic, I had a student. I didn't think she was going to make it. And I told her that. I said, look, unless you change, you're not going to make it. This ain't a job for you. Bro, when I tell you she proved me wrong, she proved me wrong, and she became not only a good, she became a good friend, a good person, but she became a really good paramedic. And that was just so awesome to see, because I didn't do that. It's not like I sat with her day by day and trained her every day. No, I was with her for a couple of days. She went off and did her thing. When she came back, and the next time I saw her as a paramedic, bro, blew me away.
Beast,
did I have anything to do with that? Maybe me talking to her and telling her, like, hey, you're not going to fucking make it. That's what, got her there. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it had no effect on her whatsoever, and that was just something inside of her. But to watch people succeed, to put my faith in people, even if I don't have any, even if in the beginning I'm like, I don't really know. I still think that's way more powerful than to have faith in something else. Because I mean, you know how I feel about Christianity. I feel for the most part, a lot of Christians look at life as anything good that happens is God's grace. Anything bad that happens is part of a plan that we as humans can't understand. And I feel like that takes a lot of the culpability, a lot of the responsibility out of our hands. And I don't like that. Now, not everyone's like that. I don't think you're not like that. Not everyone's like that, but a big majority, especially being here in the South, we're very heavy. We're heavy Catholics, heavy Baptists, and Protestants, and Episcopalians, and the whole lot of them. And a lot of them put a lot of stock in this plan that we as human beings cannot understand. And I don't put stock in that, because I see people doing good every day, and they don't have to have heaven as a reward or hell as a punishment. They're just good people. So I think putting our faith in each other, in people, is a lot more powerful than, rewarding them in heaven or punishing them in a hell. Like, let's just be good people to each other. If we put our faith in each other, and we show each other that if you're a good person and you pay it forward, not expecting anything back, then we'll have a much better society than if we're constantly afraid to get punished after we die, or if we're working towards an ultimate goal. You know what I'm saying? That's just how I feel about faith.
Right. So it's funny you say that, and I think that's one of those things. And I like I said, I agree with you. I think that when we break things down to such a simplistic aspect, I think so many times we lose the nuance of human existence, of human experience. When it's just like, well, I don't know, whatever God planned, whatever, I'ma just roll with. Like, that's not even reality. You know what I'm saying? The reality is that God gave us choice. He gave us a mind. He gave us a soul. He gave us decisions. He gave us all of these things. So if it was just something we just float around and we're just here for no reason, and then that wouldn't even work. That would be pointless, right? So I agree with you. But I also think that we mischaracterize the ideas of what, like, love versus hope versus faith. You know what I'm saying? I think those sometimes get, like, mixed, because I think we can love all people, right? We can have hope in people. We can believe in people. But I think that faith in itself is more based on evidence. You know what I'm saying? So faith is based on, like, so from my perspective, right? Faith is like, I have faith in God because there's evidence that he exists and he has done X, Y, and Z, right? And because I know, because even in my own life, even in, historically, when I look at, and I don't mean people, because remember, we can't conflate God and people. Like, it's like when you go to church, you know, you go to church, it's some of the most vile human beings you ever meet in the church. I ain't gonna, you know what I mean? And you and I have had these conversations where the church has been responsible for so many of the horrid things in history. I mean, you could look at, I mean, you could put some of the mainstream religion in the same category as doggone communism. I mean, you could put it in the same category in many aspects. You know what I'm saying? Because the truth is that many of the religious structures and systems and people run things have caused a lot of hurt in the world, right?
Oh yeah.
But they've also caused a lot of good too. But I think what we have to separate the two is that it was not God that hurt you, it was man. It was the church that hurt you. It was people who did not have an understanding of your intrinsic value. It's people who did not have an understanding of who God is. It's people who lost sight of where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do and where we're supposed to go. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you look at history, you look at, you know, biblically, you look at like the Israelites, literally they were saved out of Egypt with plagues and all kind of stuff and still wanted like gods and still wanted to worship statues and it was like, bruh, I'm standing right here showing y'all, you know. So we have to keep that in mind, you know. I think it's important. But like, I think people being good, I think the question becomes, what makes them good? Like, where do we, you know, people always ask the question, like, where do we even get that framework of good? You know what I'm saying? And where do we get the framework of bad from the first place? You know, so that's kind of a different conversation, but that's always the question that comes up when people say, like, you know, there's good people in the world. You're correct. There are good people in the world. You know, and then you ask the question, well, where does that, what makes it good? Why? And
Well,
why is it so?
I do feel like we, you know, and I think it spans across all belief systems and ideologies, is, you know, you just have this almost universal framework for what you good and, you know, I don't want to say good and bad,
Right.
but like the way you should live your life, you know. And I go back to the Ten Commandments because the Ten Commandments are not like they didn't come out of nowhere, you know.
Right.
Like they didn't. I know the story, and
Right.
you know, God gave it to Moses and everything like that. But you know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, covet thy neighbor's wife, and stuff like that. Those are intrinsic. Those are universal values that other cultures already had long before we started talking about the Ten Commandments. You know. I think people have known since the beginning of humankind that like killing another human being is not a good inherent thing. Like you're just not supposed to do it. You shouldn't take things from people. You know, I think it's universal. Now, do people do those things all the time? Absolutely. I'm living in a city right now that is #1 murder capital of like all of the United States, just per capita, because I don't know, like it's the Wild West in New Orleans right now. But that doesn't mean that everybody in New Orleans is inherently bad. Even though there's a larger number of bad people, there's still a larger number of good people that are just living their lives. So what makes you intrinsically good or bad? I think that's very, it's a subjective thought, but I also think that has objective principles to it, because I think if you live your life in a way that does not go out of your way to hurt or infringe on other people, you're going to be inherently good. You know, it doesn't mean you're out there doing social work or, you know, philanthropy and volunteering. But like, if you get up and you go to work every day, you do your job, you don't go out of your way to hurt anybody else. Maybe you're not contributing, but at the same time, you're not contributing to good, you're not contributing to evil. So if you're just kind of a neutral person, I think you lean towards more being a good person overall than a bad person. Now, if you're that guy that's out there, you know, you're cutting everybody off in traffic, you know, you're pushing people around, you try to just kind of mess with people and stuff like that, you know, what's the value in that? Like, all you're doing is you're hurting other people. You're ruining someone else's day. And I think overall that makes you intrinsically bad. That makes you objectively and subjectively a bad person. You know, if you go out of your way just to fuck with other people, that makes you an intrinsically bad person, right? And there's no way to get around it.
No, for sure. I think, I mean, I think that goes with anybody, because then on the flip side, because there's people who do a whole lot of good but have poor motives. You know what I mean? So I think, because you have people, like think about that perspective, like the people who, they do all of this good, but it's for the purpose of what? To get attention, to get motivate, to get support. I mean, I know, like, for example, like, and nothing against anybody who does this, but like, you know, people who go and they we talked about this, videotaping themselves, doing all of these, like, good things for the world, and look at me, I'm helping this person, and so on and so forth. And like, I think there's a balance there. I think, one, yeah, okay, I see you're trying to inspire more people to do good things. All right, so that's the positive, optimistic look at it. But on the flip side, you have people that do a whole lot of good things to get attention, to get clicks, to get likes, to get, you know, support, to get attention, you know, like I said, attention, all that stuff, to get followers. I mean, you figure, you know, look at me, think about all the religious cults in the past. I mean, having been experienced, you know, religious cults, you know what I mean? Having know how that operates, they do a lot of really great stuff. They do really nice things for you, you know what I mean? They do a lot of supportive things for you. And so what happens is that through that support and that likeness and that niceness and that family aspect, or whatever the case, what happens next? You get drawn in, and really it was for a different purpose, you know what I'm saying? It's for control, you know, I think. And so I think that when we get to the intrinsic good, intrinsic bad, I would dare to say the reason that people operate in that way, that's cutting people off in traffic or shooting people, whatever the case is because we have forgotten our intrinsic value. You know what I'm saying? I think it's so. You remember the Lion King?
Yeah.
All right, so you remember when Simba had run off and was running around with Timon and Pumbaa, you know, eating the bugs and doing all that stuff?
Yeah, just being free, man. Just being free.
Right. Because, you know, Hakuna Matata and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But you remember when Rafiki showed up and bonked him on the head, you know what I'm saying, and sent him to the water, and he seen, you know, Mufasa up in the clouds, and my boy said, remember who you are, right? I would dare to say that good, bad, indifferent, all of those things come from a perspective of a lack of identity. If we don't know who we are just as people, right? If we believe, like, for example, if I believe, like for me, if I believe that everybody's made in God's image, and so I'm going to treat everybody as if they were made it, if they have that type of value.
Yes.
I may not agree with everything you do. I may not support everything you do, but I do treat you like you have intrinsic value.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the good and the bad, or the right and the wrong, or the cutting people off in traffic, or helping somebody go across the street, I think that's a lot of where that is born from. Do you see intrinsic value in the other person? And do you see that value in yourself? Because think about it. If you value yourself, you wouldn't treat people like that. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
You know, and so that's kind of like what we look at. You know, I think, doing things for their own sake. I think there is a difficult balance of finding what are you doing for you, what are you doing for others, and what are you doing just because you just think you're supposed to be doing. You know what I'm saying? You know, where is the foundation? You know what I'm saying? Where is that point of reference that we can always go back to? Because, I mean, all of us have those aspects, you know.
Well, you said it before. You know, you kind of pointed out the people that like to, especially on social media, like to point out themselves doing a good act. You know,
right?
And so it's almost like people are starting to believe, like, if you do good and nobody sees it, then you're not doing good.
Right.
So then you can turn that around and say, if you're doing bad and nobody sees it, are you really being bad?
Right.
You know, so I think, and if you roll it back to faith, right? We're talking about faith. Right. So if you don't have faith in, like me, like I don't believe in a Christian God, right? So if I'm doing things just for the sake of doing things, you know what I'm saying? What did he say? Doing things for their own sake. So if I'm doing things for their own sake, I have to find the value in those things. Are they good things or are they bad things? You know, and I like to use this example. I was dating a girl. We were at Waffle House, and we saw this elderly man that was walking down the street. Now it's Southeast Louisiana. It's like summer. I think it's pretty much summertime, 8 months out of the year. I don't remember what month it was, but he's drenched in sweat and he just doesn't look good. You know, she looks at me and I look at her, and like we're like, we need to go help this dude, because like obviously he's been walked for a while and nobody in between wherever he started and us wanted to do anything. So we go pick him up. We found an ID. We ended up getting him back to his house. His family found out that he had Alzheimer's, right? Mm-hmm. So we're leaving, and she's like, don't you feel like God put that man in our lives for us to help him? I'm like, no, I feel like we were just two decent human beings, and we were the only ones that decided that we would be willing to and I don't want to say inconvenience our day, but
Right.
we stopped eating, paid our tab, we fucking left, we went out and we helped this guy just because he was another human being in need. I don't need to be rewarded in heaven for that.
Right.
And I don't need to be I don't need the fear of being punished in hell for not helping out a fellow
Right.
human being. What is wrong with just seeing someone in need and helping them and not having to, and well, now I am broadcasting it, but I'm trying to use it
Right.
as an example.
No, I got you. I get you.
People,
Right.
Of if you look for God. So you could absolutely make the argument that, like, okay, so let's say he walked 20 blocks
Right.
to us because we were the ones that were going to help him.
Right.
We were going to help him. Nobody was destined to help him in between, but he came to us. We could sit here and make that philosophical and religious argument, or we just realize that there's a lot of people out there that go about their day. They're not looking to help other people. They're not looking for things to fix. They're not looking
Right.
for any value in human life, overall.
Right.
So I mean, I just feel like it's way more powerful us as human beings when there is no reward and there is no punishment. You're literally just out there doing
Right.
things. Your faith is in other people. Because I believe that if you just help other people and you don't ask for anything in return, that puts, let's talk about energy. It puts good energy in the world.
Right.
You don't have to be rewarded for everything that you do. You don't need people to see every good thing that you do. You just
Right.
do it. And then,
Right.
I really believe this, that it will come back around. And if you're going to get rewarded, it's going to be by someone helping you when you're down. Because when I was down, a lot of people helped me out. So if I ever see anybody down, I definitely try to do my best to help them out just because they're other human beings and I know what it's like to be down. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's how I view my faith.
Yeah.
My faith is more in tune to humanity than it is to a higher power.
Right. And so the thing about that is, and so a couple things you had mentioned, but one thing I would say, like, I feel you on that. I mean, that makes it makes sense, right? It makes sense from a rational, logical standpoint. I mean, you look at it you reap what you sow, right? You know what I mean? That sounds like everything is you reap what you sow. You put out what you get back. I want to touch on something that kind of jumped out at me though, is that there's a big misconception that, like, in Christianity, right? So, and this is absolutely 100% the fault of the church. This is, I would tell you right now, what I'm about to say is absolutely the fault of the church. It ain't got nothing to do with nobody in the world at all. Like, this is the church's fault. The great misconception is that people who are Christians do good or bad for reward of heaven or for fear of hell. That is actually the opposite of the gospel. And that's what frustrates me, because we have churches that do teach that. They teach a work-based faith, a work-based salvation, that you got to do a bunch of good deeds and you'll be rewarded in heaven. No, because if you look biblically, the Bible says your good deeds are like rags in comparison to the righteousness of God. The reality is it has nothing to do with good or bad. It has everything to do with holy or not. It's righteousness versus unrighteousness. And the reality is that because of there being sin in the world, nobody is righteous. That's why God had to come. That's the point. Like, the whole point of the gospel, like, people don't see this. So when I get so I have these conversations with people, like, different faiths, and I'm all for it. Let's do it. But one of the things I always say, I think one of the biggest challenges or the differences between many of the faiths in the world and many of the in the Christian faith, right? True Christian faith, not this stuff that we see. You know what I mean? And that goes with the hyper conservative, like, all right, crazy, like, Westboro Baptist Christian folks, you know what I mean, fire and brimstone, and the extreme progressive, oh, it's all good, there is nothing of anything, just love, you know what I mean? Like, all of those aside, at the end of the day, true Christianity is a balance. But I would say that true Christianity and the true gospel, it is a gift that we cannot receive or repay. It is a gift that was paid for us. That's it. Like, that's it. Because, I mean, think about this, and I know you're familiar with the thief on the cross, right?
Yes.
So you got the thief on the cross. He spent his whole life, living a life of thievery and everything else. He gets up on that cross. He is facing judgment. And Christ is up there. And you got the other dude on the other side who says, hey, dog, you supposed to be big and bad. Why don't you jump off this? You know, what happened? But then you got my man over here on the other side, that thief. He looks at him and says, you know what? Look, I deserve to be here. I'm just being honest with you. This is the life I lived, and this is where it led me.